I actually wanted to be a commercial pilot. So that was the original big dream, was to be a pilot. And so I moved to Daytona Beach, Florida from Dubai when I was 16. And then I started my PPL, my private pilot license. I got maybe about 40 something hours in a Cessna 172. I was flying airplanes before even driving cars.
Hello and welcome to the LD Aviation Podcast, formerly known as the Business Aviation Collective Podcast, where we get a chance to talk to people in the aviation industry who are just doing extraordinary things and are just genuinely fun people to talk to. Today we get a chance to talk to Marlis Dsouza. And Marlis has a long background in aviation, starting with a Bachelor of Science from Embry Riddle in Aeronautics. Then she has a Master of Science in Systems Engineering, also from Embry Riddle. And she took that systems engineering through a lot of her career, but recently she has switched it over to the artist side of that. She now owns and operates ArtsyByM. And I'm just so excited to have you here today, Marlis. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Excited to be here.
So you have a really cool background, and I think a lot of us look at systems engineering and art probably as a really huge contrast. But let's kind of start out. How did you even get into aviation? Like, what brought you to Embry Riddle and those types of studies?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to be a commercial pilot. So that was the original big dream, was to be a pilot. And so I moved to Daytona Beach, Florida from Dubai when I was 16. And I joined the aeronautical science program. And then I started my PPL, my private pilot license. I got maybe about 40 something hours in a Cessna 172. I was flying airplanes before even driving cars. And soon into that whole process, actually had to switch gears, only because we kind of realized that financially that was going to be a lot. While I kind of felt like a big part of me was like a bit bummed because, the whole glamorous life of being a pilot and like that kind of dream, I had to like let it go. That was like my first shift in careers at a really, really young age. So that's what brought me into the whole aviation world. It was really with a dream of being a pilot, and that's how it all started.
That is so cool. Okay, so I want to talk about that, but I also want to hear, what was it like to move from Dubai to Florida? Like, had you been to Florida before?
My family and I, we did visit about 6 months before I started school there, and I really enjoyed it, but it was a big culture shock. Obviously, like growing up in the Middle East compared to, Florida, and that whole life was a big culture shock for sure. But I was truly living my best life. I embraced it all. I really got into, anything and everything to do with like university and college living when it came to like athletics and Greek life and activities and clubs and sports. And I really embraced it all. So yeah.
Okay, so you go in, you get about 40 hours, and then you're like, I'm going to have to pivot. Tell me about that.
I switched to an aeronautics degree and got minors in human factors, psychology, and aviation safety because I figured like maybe I could work a job in flight ops or something on ground or like something of that nature. But I still wanted to be involved in the aviation world in some capacity, without losing, like while still maintaining all of the knowledge that I learned from even like the little time that I spend flying. I'm like, I can definitely use this to, an ops or dispatch or something like that. So I kind of kept that going, just to kind of keep in the same industry. Yeah.
Can you just tell us what systems engineering is? What do you do in that? Or what did you learn, maybe?
It was, it's an engineering fashion or form, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but basically, it's to design complex systems, you need a systems engineer to outline, the use case for a system and very high level design. So you figure out, what the system needs to do, and then you create like models, you write system requirements, and typically you walk through the whole system design lifecycle with other engineers in the process to kind of from start to finish to like see it all come together. So systems engineers are involved in a lot of complex engineering designs. So that's what I signed up for.
And has art, even through your studies at Embry Riddle, has art been a part of your life?
Very much so. Yeah. While I was at Embry Riddle, I was still creating art in the dorms. I had founded a multicultural Greek sorority, and through that, I was also doing things like henna tattoos as fundraisers to like raise money for our sorority, and even like creating art for the sorority as like display like the Greek letters and stuff. And it was still a part of my life through college as well. Big time. Yeah.
That's so cool. I just last weekend dropped my kiddo off at college. And one of her big goals was to join our sorority. She's in Montana State in Bozeman. And so she's really excited about the sororities. And I have to say, I really was naive about what the sororities can do for you. And, I think when I grew up, they talked a lot about just all the hazing that happened. And that's what I kind of thought about it was. But then we got to know it more. And like you're saying, it was like a community. And there was really I expect there to be a space for her to really make some good friends and stuff. And so that's so cool you've joined or created one, give more people access to have those friends.
And I mean, it was a lot more than just the social aspect of it. It was also like we had a philanthropy and a cause. So our philanthropy was domestic violence awareness and prevention. So we would even work with like local, shelters and things like that, raise money for them, host events to again raise money for these causes. But it was also an opportunity to foster leadership with other women and encourage and empower women. So it wasn't just like, all right, let's just party and we have friends, but it was really more than that. So that was a really cool experience that I feel like I don't talk about a lot, but that was something that I think also shaped me to be who I am today. So yeah.
Yeah, I really have just in the last couple of weeks really started to change my opinion or my understanding of what sororities do, and that's really great. Those philanthropies, I had no idea that each sorority had a philanthropy, and all the actually good, like the great community service that you guys do, and yeah, women leading women and participating in events like that is awesome. So anyway, I went down a different track than I had expected, but I thought that's really cool. So, okay, so then you graduated, you got your BS, then you got your Master of Science as well. That looks like it was in 2018 that you finished that. I want to ask about the Dubai Air Show at the World Aviation Safety Summit in 2016. It looks like you participated quite a bit in that one. That looks really cool. What was that?
I felt like I was in another kind of existential crisis moment. In between, like once you're done with one degree, life doesn't always kind of play out the way you imagine. So you have to kind of just figure out, solutions and stuff. So I was able to join a company that was hosting these aviation events. And I love hosting events and I'm really organized and stuff like that. So working for the Global Aerospace Summit and the World Aviation Safety Summit was an incredible opportunity for me to network and meet with other C-level executives from all over the world, but put on a really big conference to ensure that everybody that was flying in had the best experience. And there was obviously talks and other little breakout sessions that were happening. And that was just an incredible opportunity again for me to kind of put my other hat on of like, well, you know what, we can host events, but we can also bring in our aviation background to, you know, piece it all together. So yeah, I did a lot of pivoting and just like going with the flow because I felt like I couldn't just identify with one single thing. So
I bet there's a lot of people who feel that same way. Yeah, I mean, how do you really know what it is that you want to do for the rest of your life? And it's going to change.
exactly. Yeah. So I gave myself permission to, try a few different things and see what I'm really good at. And I could be good at more than one thing, and that would be okay.
Yeah. So, what are some of the tasks that you had during that time? What did you do for the summit? I mean, it sounds like you greeted, you know, people that came in, and you also did some of the. You were like the operations manager, so you worked on budgeting even for this event, right?
Yeah, so for the World Aviation Safety Summit, I was kind of thrown in very last minute, maybe 1 or 2 months before this really big event was, and they're like, "We need an ops manager," and I was like, "Cool, I've never done this before, but let's go. What do you need?" And so yeah, managing the budget, like contacting suppliers for, like the stage and the branding and just like the operational setup of the hotel, making sure the hotel knew, what resources we needed and setting all of that up. And then on the day of, ensuring that everything worked smoothly. So like if the projector was good or the mics were fine or like the number of water bottles on the table down to like the chairs, it was every major and minor detail that I had to handle all of those things. And honestly, I thrived in that environment. I was just, boom, 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 just, what do you need? Cool. Like problem, let's find a solution, let's go. So it was so fun. And I didn't know I was gonna enjoy it as much as I did, but that was really a good time for sure. Yeah.
It sounds so cool. How many people go to that? Like, what's the attendance like?
Honestly, it's been a few years now since that event took place. But I would say ballpark maybe like 800 to 1,000 people, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But I mean, it was a niche summit, the safety summit, obviously in Dubai, out of all places. But I think it was about 1,000 people.
Did they do that? It was that a one-off, or do they still have that? I should know this probably, but
That's a great question. I should know this too, but I think it was a yearly one, but I'm not certain anymore.
that's all right. It's been like 10 years ago almost, so very cool. I bet you that got you a lot of skills also in the networking section. Are there any suggestions you have for people when they're out networking?
I have a lot of friends that are, artists or even maybe not artists that have a problem with this. And every time I go out networking, I'm like, listen, they're probably more embarrassed and nervous than you are, and everybody's a little nervous all the time. So I think it's just a matter of just being yourself and like having an easy conversation and not thinking too much about it can kind of build confidence. And obviously, the more you do it, the more confidence you have. But also at the end of the day, just thinking like you're just talking to another human. Like it's really not that serious. And again, if you say something funny, like you can just laugh about it and then walk away and then go talk to someone else. you know? I think it's just like we put too much pressure on going to like networking events or like networking with people, or even if they're C-level executives. And, I'm like, well, this is a CEO, great, but like that's another human. Like I shouldn't be this nervous. It's okay. Right. Um, so I like to look at it like that. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're so right. Everybody is just human. Everybody has very similar experiences in terms of, yeah, it's probably a little embarrassing or worrisome to be in the crowd and trying to go meet new people, but you're right, go right up to somebody and they're probably equally as worried. All right, so then you got an internship at Thales, and I should have a better idea, but can you tell us what Thales is, and then what did you do? Like, what does the company do, and then what did you do as an intern?
So the company Talis, in French they pronounce it Thales. It's a French company, French based, but they're worldwide. They also have an office here in the UAE as well, but they have they do things in aviation, aerospace, defense, and space. So it's a lot. What I was working on in Melbourne, Florida, was Wi-Fi and connectivity. So it was, I mean, again, very streamlined thing. It wasn't, the space and defense. That particular branch in Melbourne was mainly doing Wi-Fi and connectivity. So yeah, and in different places around the world, they work on different products and projects and stuff.
And that's where you really got to use some of your systems engineering education.
Yeah. So I was more in like a system test capacity, like IVVQ, which is like integration, verification, validation, qualification. So more in like the testing, but like system tests. It was like end-to-end testing. And but I still worked with systems engineers, but also, like I mentioned earlier, like creating and writing requirements. So we would be involved in part of that as well in the writing, like editing requirements to make sure that they were testable so that when it reached us as test engineers to write test cases and test procedures, we knew that we were testing against requirements that were written well and that were testable. So yeah, that was the first opportunity that I got to actually put some of my systems engineering degree to use.
So you were an intern for 6 months, I believe, or so, and then you moved up into a full-time position. Obviously, they liked your work. Did you do anything different, or were you still on that Wi-Fi project when you were working for them full-time?
Definitely got more involved when I started working there full time. As an intern, we didn't get involved as deeply, and then as a full-time employee, really got like thrown into the deep end, which I mean I enjoyed because I learned so much. Things like even like Linux, which I didn't, as an engineer that's not really like a developer and like a coder per se, getting exposed to certain programs and like tech, it was really exciting. Like the inner nerd in me was just like, whoa, this is so cool.
Oh, very cool. Anything from doing that job that, because I'm going to ask about the artist change over here soon, but in that job, was there anything that you were like, I went to school for it, but I don't like it? Or did you just enjoy that work?
The actual work, I think I did enjoy. I mean, there were other things about like maybe the like corporate life and politics that's the part that I didn't enjoy. But the job in itself and the team and the actual work, I didn't really have many complaints there. No, I did enjoy what I was doing. Yeah.
And while you're working at that job, were you doing event planning and doing your art at the same time, kind of thing?
Yeah, so my little side hustle started to grow when I was working as an engineer at Talis. I was getting like commission requests for art. I was participating in some group fairs. So in Orlando, which is an hour away from Melbourne, Florida, there were some more like group shows and activations, little craft fairs. So I was participating in a little of these here and there just because like the inner artist, she's bubbling. She was growing and she didn't want to be left out. So, yeah, very much so. It started to get more and more serious when I was working a full time engineering job.
All right. So you're juggling like two things. You just, you have a side gig and you're like, hey, I like this, but I also like this. And I think that all of us have that. Or if we don't have that, we could have that. So I think sometimes people are stifled and they're like, oh, I can only do one thing. But obviously, you don't have to do just one thing. I mean, you're a good example of that.
Yeah. And now I'm like doing what feels like 10 things.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you left Talis and you created ArtsyByM. I want to know what that was like to leave a full-time job. And if I'm not mistaken, you also then left Florida and you went back to Dubai at about the same time.
Yeah. So it wasn't as much as leaving as much as I had to leave. So the sad part of the story, that again I feel like I don't talk as much and I feel like I should share more about, was the fact that my visa had expired. And so even because I was there on like a student visa and then like a post grad like student work permit, because all of those things kind of expired and the time ran out, I wasn't able to get like a more permanent work visa because the first part of that process is a lottery process, shockingly enough. So I wasn't able to stay even though Talis really wanted to keep me. So it wasn't as much as like I decided to leave as much as like the decision was made for me. So yeah, that's that big kind of life-changing moment also triggered a lot of, another existential crisis moment where I'm like, what am I doing? And then I had to figure out like, hey, this might be the my chance to like take the risk and pursue this dream that I have had of being an artist.
So when you want to get a work visa, you said it's a lottery program. So you apply and they literally just pick people out of the hat, kind of. Is that right?
This particular visa is called the H1B, and it is mainly for people that are looking for work, but mostly like specialized jobs. And so the company that you're working for has to apply for you, and it only opens once every year. And there's limited slots, I think about 80,000 slots, and usually over 2 to 300,000 people from the world apply. So had, I think it was like 3 chances. One was after my bachelor's degree, and then I didn't get it, and that's why I left after my bachelor's, then went back for a master's. And then after my master's, I had 2 chances, and I didn't get them for both. So I'm just like, maybe this is not where I'm meant to be, because I mean, it should not be that hard. But I had coworkers working on my team that were in the same lottery and that would get it, and then they got to stay, and I had to leave. So it was an extremely traumatic event.
Oh, I bet. Frustrating. And by this time, you had been kind of in the Florida area for, gosh, had it been like 8 years or something? Like a long time.
Yeah, almost 10, 11 years. Yeah, that became my home.
Okay, so then you're like, okay, I have to go. You leave Thales and you're creating ArtsyByM. How did you, when you started your own company, I'm not sure how that's like in Dubai, but what were some of the roadblocks you had?
I think in essence, it was just about making the decision, honestly, because once the decision was made, I was pretty much like all in. So, regardless of what really came in my way, I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. So, I had to get a business license here, which is very different than in the US. Then, once I got a business license, just like kind of setting up all of the things like, business bank account, and then figuring out a website. Like, I ended up designing and developing my own website, figuring out what I was gonna be offering, like, how I was gonna do everything, but also very non-traditionally. I mean, an art business isn't like your traditional business that somebody would go into, right? Especially after engineering. So, trying to navigate that and figure out how I was gonna make it all work, like, those were some of the biggest challenges I would say I faced.
And over the last couple of years while you've been working it, I'm always curious because in my business, it has morphed a lot. But did you start off planning on providing certain items or certain services, certain art, event planning, and now 2 years later, is it different?
Yeah, it definitely has changed a little bit. In my first year, I created this art collection. It was 30 pieces. So for me to decide to create this full collection, and it was the first one as a full-time artist in Dubai, I was like, I need to make it a big deal, but also I'm an independent artist. So I was doing everything on my own, wasn't represented by a gallery, and still I'm not. So for me to kind of decide like, okay, I'm going to create this body of work and then list it on my website, host an art exhibition, and bring people in to view and purchase, that was kind of where it started. And then from there, I had to pivot. So whether it was like maybe the style and the concept and the inspiration behind the art, maybe just thinking about different sizing or like little things like that. Those were like small things that I had to pivot. But also, I started offering workshops. So since then, I've done like workshops in my studio. I've collaborated with other brands and hosted workshops. And so with that, I'm still trying to find my fitting and see like where I want to go with that. So I'm kind of like in the gray area there where I'm like, do I want to continue to do this how I'm doing it right now? Or do I want to change it up? Do I want to create something a bit more unique? So yeah, I think it's constantly changing to some degree. So yeah,
Do you enjoy that part of the change, or is that more nerve wracking?
change can always be nerve wracking for sure. But I realize that in this industry and career that I've chosen, I need to be more flexible to change. because it's already such a volatile kind of industry to begin with. I can't be so stuck in my ways. Like I have to be able to pivot and change as I go. So I guess I'm just like more used to change now than ever before. There's still a resistance, but yeah.
I think that's an awesome quality and probably what makes you successful as an entrepreneur. Because yeah, I mean, you're right. We don't really like change. It'd be great if we just were like, hey, this product, I earn this amount of money and it's great. But your ability to change, like teaching those classes and stuff, that's key to success of your business.
I'm exploring more ways to start to bring that knowledge as well from what I've learned from like the art technical side of things, but also just the art business side of things. So to be able to share that knowledge with others as well that might be a few steps behind on their journey, and like maybe I can share that information as well. So it's about pivoting, but it's also about like learning and then sharing and teaching as well. So
So I want to hear all about what does Artsy by M, what do you provide? Like tell us all about the things and where do we see some examples?
yeah. So I create abstract fine art, mostly inspired by my journals. And lately, I've been really getting into sharing my personal stories and my journey through visual art. And I also create functional art pieces that you can like use as home decor, but they have function to it. So coasters, like trinket or jewelry trays. Recently, I started creating bottle openers with the cool collaboration that I did with Corona. There's the fine art aspect, there's functional art. I've also done furniture collaborations as well. You can find me on my website, artsybym.com. I'm on social media as well. Those are the products that I offer. And services would be workshops. So, like in studio workshops and also like event collaboration workshops as well.
What is the day to day, like, what does your daily life look like? Do you start out in a studio? I'm just kind of curious. What does your day as an entrepreneur and artist look like?
I feel like they usually don't look the same at all. It really just depends on like what I'm actually doing in my art business at that stage. But I have a home studio. So where I'm at right now, I'm in my living room. So I converted 80% of the living room into the studio, and then 20% is actually the living room. I'm just a few feet away from my bedroom. So a lot of my life consists of working from home, so I can just wake up, have my breakfast and create a morning beverage and then walk right over to my desk and start working. Usually, what it is, do the administrative stuff. There's social media. I do a lot of that because I do all of my social media marketing myself. So that's a lot of the heavy lifting. And then while I'm in the process of creating a collection or a series, then I spend a lot of my nights in the studio because I feel like that's when I'm usually most creative. I guess the creative juices are flowing at night. And then in the midst of all of that, if there's events or I'm hosting workshops or there's pop-ups, then I'm all over the place. So no 2 days are the same.
What events do you have coming up soon?
So just yesterday, I sent to save the date. So I'm hosting an open studio on September 14th in my studio in Dubai. Basically, what an open studio is an opportunity to bring people into this space. They can see the studio in action. I have a lot of art here in my home as well. So it's an opportunity for some of my super excited collectors and community to come experience that. I also will do a live art demonstration. I'm also going to be doing some spoken word. So it's an opportunity for me to share like the journal pages that inspire some of the art. And then it kind of just like turns into a fun interactive game and like a party. So it's just a great way to like build community, but also share the art and my story and bring people closer into my system, I guess.
Nice. That sounds so great. Okay. And you said that was September 14th?
That's right. Yeah.
For those of you listening, we'll pop some information. And of course, it's probably depending on who's listening, it might be a little far away, or perhaps we have some Dubai listeners as well, which would be great. I have always wanted to go to Dubai. I just think it would be so much fun. So it's on my bucket list. I'll go someday.
You know where to find me.
I'll come look you up. So that's great. I'd be curious, do you have any maybe suggestions or words of advice for people who maybe they're in a job, they have a side hustle, or they'd like to create a side hustle? Like, I'm just looking kind of for some words of wisdom on how to make that transition.
For me personally, the thought of it at the time seemed so overwhelming. And obviously, like, you're looking at this really, really big thing essentially that you want to accomplish. And for me, what helped is just like trying to break it down and really just put one foot in front of the other and try to just make the smallest progress, like whatever it might be, versus trying to take really big leaps all the time. And then your nervous system's just all out of whack because your body and your mind's not used to doing that. I think just like trying to break it down into smaller tasks, like bite-sized things that then kind of take you one step in front of the other and create progress over time. Also, I think it's just a game of patience, which I'm trying to take my own advice at this point, but it's about really, really being patient and trying not to chase that like instant gratification of like success in business, because that's a big thing that I learned initially, where I'm like, okay, I want to go from 0 to 200 real fast, and that was the quickest way to burn out. So for me, I had to really learn, give yourself permission to actually take your time with it and not try to just like really rush through it all, because the journey is the fun part, as cliche as it sounds.
When I started my business, so we're going on 10 years now, it was not an overnight success, which a lot of times you see on social media. It's like, oh, I made $4 billion in 2 months, or, or something like you made a lot of money really quickly. But this is really not what happens. It takes, like you said, step by step, putting the time in. And we didn't really grow substantially until probably around year 7, 6 or 7. We had quite a bit of slow growth up in the beginning. But yeah, patience, one step at a time, just like you said.
I heard this somewhere. It's like, yeah, it takes about 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yes. All these big companies who are like, oh, yeah, we're making so much money. It did not happen in a year. Well, Marlis, how about if somebody wanted to contact you or find you? We've got your website. Tell us again what your website is, and then maybe any other ways to contact you.
Yeah. So my website is artsybym.com, and that's the same handle all throughout social media. So it's artsybym. And yeah, that's the best way to contact me. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me under Marlis Dsouza. Yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Marlis, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us. I think that your story is inspirational because there's a lot of people who are in, main jobs, and they just haven't made that leap to, I guess, a whole different career and industry. So very inspirational.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to like share my story and hopefully inspire people to, follow their dreams.
Definitely. Most definitely. Great. Well, if I ever get to Dubai, which I swear I'm going to someday, I will come and look you up then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Marlis.
Thank you.